Sephora, how's it going? Good morning, everybody. I'm Robert Nelson. I'm with Pivotal New Mexico. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm going to spotlight Michael too and Marisa. And welcome to Impact and Coffee for the first Impact and Coffee of November. It is November 2nd. I can't believe it. And we are joined today by our wonderful guest, Marisa Magallanez over at the Albuquerque Community Foundation, and also our wonderful co-host, Michael Green. Good morning, Michael. How are you today? How was your weekend?
Hey, everything's going well. Good to see you all again. Good to see you, Robert. Yeah, everything's good. I'm happy to, be with this wonderful group of people again, as always, hearing what's going on in the community. So I'm happy for that.
Awesome.
I guess before we get started, I'll let you guys know, for those of you who have never been to Impact and Coffee before, I'll let you know what it is. It's an open, welcoming conversation to exchange stories and ideas, to foster innovation, to strengthen the nonprofit sector, and to build community. And typically in the past, we've done this all while enjoying a delicious cup of coffee from Lily Marie's. So it was always nice to gather around the coffee pot at those and do some networking. And also a special thanks to the Albuquerque Community Foundation, who housed us for so many years before we had to go virtual. So yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell what Impact and Coffee is. So we always like to do Gratitude Tuesdays to think about things that you're grateful for. So I would encourage everybody in the audience to introduce themselves in the chat and also put something that they're grateful for. And kind of on that note, I guess I will say that I'm grateful for the holidays coming up. It's always a nice time of year to, kind of relax a little bit, spend some time with your loved ones. So I'm kind of excited for that. And how about you, Robert? What are you grateful for these days?
I'm grateful for family. So I spent yesterday was All Souls Day. So we went up north and visited Elisa's parents and did the whole thing. It was good. It was good to be around. Also my new nephew. So my sister-in-law had her baby a few months ago. He's almost 3 months old. And it's so wonderful to see my in-laws, my mother and my father-in-law so happy to have grandkids. So I can't tell you how joyful, what a child means for families. So yeah, it was a great restful weekend, and I appreciate them so much just for letting me into their home and letting me be part of their family. So, but as Michael said, yeah. So as you're welcome everyone this morning. I see a lot of regulars. As you're introducing yourself into Zoom today, your name, your pronouns, your organization. Let us know what you're grateful for in the chat if you can. That'd be really helpful just to see some of that positive energy to start off on our Tuesday morning, which is a bit cloudy and a little cold. I know my cat's like. My cat was screaming to come inside. She was like, I don't want to be out here. I'm like, all right, you can stay inside. It's fine. But is there, Michael, do we have any announcements on the horizon that we want to share with folks before we get going this morning?
Let's see. We always have the Next Gen In grant that we offer. There's information about that goes out in our newsletter. And I can also drop the link into the chats that we know, so that way you can all access it. But it's basically a way for individuals who are 25 years or younger who are trying to build capacity within organizations to receive a grant. We've just recently upped the amount of money that these grants have from 1,000 to it's either 2,500 or 3,000. So it's pretty substantial now. So that's exciting. So if you are under 25, if you are 25 or younger, or there's somebody in your organization who is and they're trying to build capacity, it's a great way for you to get some additional funding. And I think that's all I can think of for now.
Also, today is election day. I forgot. I haven't forgotten. It's election day. So if you have not voted, there are many polling places outside today. I know I go to the one downtown over here on 15th and Lomas. I early voted on Saturdays. So I was lucky to do that and actually get in line around like 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock actually, and get my vote in. But and Marisa with her sticker has voted. Awesome, I love it. But folks, if you're looking for a polling place or anything like that, just check out nmvotes.org. They provide all the information that you possibly can know about elections. They also have election guides and also just locations where you can vote today. So go out, go vote. Today's there's a big election going on. I don't know if you know, it's our mayoral election. It's pretty critical for our city today. So go out and vote for mayor. There's a few bonds that are also very important today, so please vote for those. Don't vote for the stadium bond. That's terrible. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. It's displacement and gentrification in a race and a class issue. So anyway, just wanted to welcome our wonderful guest, Marisa Magallanez. Thank you so much, Marisa, for joining us today. We really appreciate that you would come today, especially late in the year. And I know it's a really busy time of the year for a lot of folks, especially in foundations. And we know that you've done this so many times. So we're really, really grateful that you would. And just want to say, welcome you to this space. Thank you for joining us, and good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Good morning, everybody. I'm Marisa Magallanez. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Equity at the Albuquerque Community Foundation. And I just wanted to share that I am very grateful to exercise my right to vote today. I always feel very, humbled and grateful when I walk into the voting centers. And I was definitely a procrastinator, did not early vote. So I woke up and went to Washington Middle School at like 7:05. So I'm a little tired this morning, but there was no lines. It was a breeze. And I'm just really grateful for all the volunteers and folks that make our whole system happen. And so that's what I'm grateful for today. Wanted to share that. And yeah, I got my sticker.
Awesome. I always want to, I was thinking about this the last time we had Impact and Coffee, and I know I asked this in the middle of our conversation, but how are you feeling for real?
How am I feeling for real?
How are you feeling for real today?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love this question. I am a little bit tired for real today. And I think it's because the end of year is really busy for all of us in foundation work and nonprofit work. There's end of year giving. So the pace feels real busy. And, going through a little bit of family stuff and, wanting to really be there to support my family. So I'm tired, but I'm also grateful to be here and, be in community. And Robert, you and I have talked a lot about that in our friendship over the years, and just talking about how important it is to have, community. And so I really do look forward to these conversations together and just the opportunity to share and connect and feel some humanity, which is great. So that's how I really am.
I appreciate that.
For real.
For real. Yeah, I hear that. I think the more and more that we try to center our feelings, especially after what we just went through with the pandemic, like the height of it, it's so important now more than ever that we start to just unpack all the things that we've been doing to ourselves over the years, like the grind culture, like the just unbelievable way that we've been operating as human beings. So I appreciate that, really do. What are just very, very casually, what are some updates you want to give about the foundation that folks on our call need to know?
Yeah. So a couple things. I think year end is a really busy, I mentioned this just a second ago, but year end is a busy time, particularly with donor advised fund holders. So, just want folks who are in nonprofit to know that, donor advised fund holders are a very large component of how the community foundation moves funds into the community, is through donor advised fund distributions. And so some of those donors are, very clear on what they want to support, who they want to support. Others look to community foundation staff for recommendations in a particular area. And so we're happy to advise as we can. And this is donor advised fund holders can give at any point in the year, but as we see, in giving in general at the end of the year, it's a busy time. And so if any folks have any questions about donor advised fund process or how that works, I'd be happy to, discuss that either offline or via the chat or in today's conversation. But this is a busy time for that kind of giving through the community foundation. So I wanted to share that first and foremost.
It's so helpful. So I know that I've asked this question about donor advised funds before, but could you walk us through that process a little bit? Because I'm always I always feel like I read up on it and then I forget. And
give me a little bit more, Robert. Where do you want me to start on the process as far as what it is or how the distributions work, or where would you like me to share more?
how could you talk about how a nonprofit can really engage in a donor advice fund to start? Because I think folks hear that and they're like, oh, and then like, and especially for me in my work, like when we talk about like grants and grant writing, and then like going through the process and then getting rejected, and then thinking like, oh, well, like sometimes a community foundation or even a foundation or like a private foundation, donor advice funds can like help. And they're like, well, what is that? What does that even mean? And how do I get into that cycle? Because I know like sometimes it's a big, huge mystery. And
no, that's a great question. Thanks for clarifying. So I think one of the simple things that I've heard about, and I would just be curious for feedback on anybody on the call if they're engaging in this way, is to let your current donor base know that you are an organization that can accept donor advised fund distributions. Any 501c3 in good standing can accept donor advised distributions. So I think there's a simple connect the dots that organizations can let donors know we can accept this gift. And it's not a secret. I mean, everybody who's a 501c3 can do this. But so that's just one piece. But talking specifically about the process and kind of how we are really trying to make sure that we're facilitating really good advice to donors who are making distributions. So I'll speak about that because, and I also will say that I came from nonprofit into the community foundation, and this was also a big. This is how it works. So I'm really happy to share this because I know when I first started at ACF, I was like, I get it now. Okay, so as I mentioned before, donor advised funds can grant out at any point in the year. And I like to think about the community foundation's relationship with donor advised funds on a spectrum. One end of the spectrum being, I would call it, a very process-based, where there are donors who are very clear on who they want to support. They've had their nonprofits that they have worked with for many years. And they hold a fund at the community foundation, and we really work to process that gift. These are donors that, typically aren't seeking the kind of, advice on what is happening in the community in a specific area or with a specific organization. And so that is what I call kind of like the low engagement end of the spectrum, where the community foundation is really just operating as a conduit for those gifts. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are donors who are interested in a particular issue or want to or have like, I need to, make these gifts and I'm new to Albuquerque and I don't know where I want to support, or, we get a lot of different ranges there. And that is where we are really operating at a high level of philanthropic advising, so to speak, and really working with a donor in any particular area that they're interested in supporting, to talk about like what is happening in that area, hone down on what they're interested in supporting, and then looking at, where, what we know about what's happening in the community. And so that's the spectrum. But I also want to share a little bit about how do we know what's happening in the community? And that's a huge part of our responsibility as a community foundation, is to be connected with all of, the sector in all the different areas of nonprofit work to understand what is happening. There's two, I shouldn't say two, but there's several ways that happens. So first and foremost, I think, one of the major functions of a community foundation, particularly our community impact staff, is to create and be out in community, creating relationships with organizations, and having that, our hope is that we are able to, have a conversation, pick up the phone, tell us what you're doing. What are you doing? Like really have that, reciprocal relationship with organizations in in this community on what they're doing, because we are I view us as kind of a dot connector, right? And hopefully we have a good sense of what's happening across, or know where to go to find out and be able to make really good recommendations to donors. So that is, and I love the feedback on, we want the community to feel and that this community foundation is accessible. We are the community's foundation. And so I invite that feedback on how we can always do that better. there is a formal way to be in the radar or on the radar of the Community Foundation, and that is through submitting an application through either our competitive grant program, which happens in the first 2 quarters of the year, or our need to know cycle, which happens, that opens up after competitive is done. And so we do use those 2 platforms to accept applications into, the Community Foundation. And then this is the place that, when I said I had the aha moment coming in from nonprofit, this is what it was to me. Maybe it's not surprising to all of you, and I hope it isn't, but if it is, there we go. Once the foundation has those applications, there are so many giving vehicles that we are managing. And as we're working throughout the year, we start off with competitive grant program. Then we move into running a lot of special grant programs. So one thing I didn't know about the Community Foundation is that we work with organizations like Bradbury STEM or Vitality Works to run their companies' grant programs. And so we are often opening up RFPs. We are often using RFPs that come through the competitive cycle and working those through different vehicles. So that's another aspect. The other thing that we do is we run some giving circles. We have some of you may be familiar with Future Fund or Social Giving Club. And so those are other donor groups that we're presenting, different organizations for their funding consideration. So there's a lot. And then of course, what we're started talking about is donor advised funds. And so between the relationship aspect of our work in the community, which is so critical, and then this formal conduit to accept applications, those are the 2 primary ways that we make sure we're informed of what's happening in the community and share that information with the various giving vehicles that we run, including donor advised funds. That was a very long answer, I'm sorry, but I hope it was clear.
That was a great answer. I didn't know that you handled some of those grant making pieces from like Bradbury STEM or other corporations around town. I didn't realize that they even had anything like that. Is there? I'm guessing there is there more you would like to name? No, I'm just kidding.
You will see all of those are, if we're running, I call them special grant programs because we're working with a different, a donor in some way, right? Whether it's this company or most of the time they're corporations that are utilizing the foundation to run grant making programs. We do those setup. We oftentimes engage their employees in the decision making process. And so, Bradbury STEM, Vitality Works. We also run a program for New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. And I think there are a few more, but I haven't had enough coffee and I need to double check my list, but I will make sure and send that out to everybody. And those RFPs have, like, each one of those has a specific, Sandia Foundation, I believe, is another one. Each of those entities has a specific cycle and, focus area, but we do the administrative work for those organizations.
That's really great information. I appreciate that. Is there, so for next year, like, is there, I didn't realize that the more you know is actually going to happen again. I appreciate that you brought that up. Could you tell folks about that cycle, and then Michael, I'll pass to you for the next question.
Which cycle is it, Robert? I'm sorry, this is sorry, I don't always know the names of the exact programs, but I know who the funder is. Can you tell me that one again?
You know what? You mentioned after the competitive cycle, you do the
the need to know.
Need to know, not more to know. I'm like NBC. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
I'm like, which one's that? Just kidding. It's early. It's okay. Need to know. So from my understanding, I actually don't have information at my fingertips about how long Need to Know has been in existence, but I know it's been around for a while, and it was created as a way that once the competitive grant program with all our fields of interest closed in the first 2 quarters of the year, well, what is the mechanism to share information more formally? And it's not a heavy lift application with the foundation. So staff at the time developed what we call the Need to Know, and it's a way to it's an ongoing, it's open all the time. And it's a way that organizations can share something that we need to know about. And it's been a great tool to, as we move through the second half of the year, make sure that we have, good information about what the work that you all are doing and can share that with various, as I mentioned, like whether it's donor advised funds or our giving circles, and moving that around. One thing I wanted to share, and this has been something that we haven't really, like, I think in the last couple of years, we've been really focused on this, is that, in any one particular program, there's finite resources. But one of our goals is to have as high of a rate of funding for applications that are coming into the competitive grant program. And so we know that there are, X amount that are going to get funded, and then there's folks that are not. And so we work really hard to move those applications through other funding vehicles. And I don't think that I know I've never really talked about that before, and I wanted to do that today, was say that, we do have a commitment, and we're trying to understand kind of what are available resources that we can either influence or direct to support those unfunded applications that come in through competitive.
That's really helpful. And I think, that's something that we've talked about with Pivotal for a long time. It's like, how do we help and support those who aren't funded through, our traditional grant cycles, and how can we find extra funding for folks? Because I think that's where a lot of diverse mechanisms come in, like impact investing, like, like NIMIC, like, and also just like trying to build capacity for like federal funding. And so I really appreciate that turn, and I'm going to pass to Michael to ask our next question. If you can, Michael, if you're willing, if you have any other questions, and then we'll kind of shift our conversation a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So over the past year and a half of the pandemic, we've had to pivot and make a lot of changes. And so I was wondering, with the Community Foundation and all that you do, is there anything that you have changed doing in your operations that you think has longevity and that you are proud of, and all that stuff? So I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the positives that have come out of the pandemic.
Yeah. Staying on the grant side of operations for 1 minute, I would like to say that and I try to champion this every speaking opportunity that I am presented with, is we are committed to particularly our competitive grant programs, but also working with our special grant programs to influence continuing unrestricted funding. We know that is such a key type of funds for agencies. And so we're really committed to that. Our competitive grant program will continue to be unrestricted next year. We're trying to really advocate that becomes a permanent change at the foundation. We are also really committed to low burdensome, low lift processes and reporting. So we're always looking at best practices in our sector of, okay, let's switch this, or let's do this, or, can we have a conversation instead of a written report? Like what else can we do? And then third, and we are doing this with our partnership with with United Way through a collaborative called DEI United, is multi-year funding, high impact multi-year funding. And so we hope that what we learned through that special grant program can also influence, our organization. I know United Way is very much on the same page as us in that level of wanting to learn, like, how do we integrate more unrestricted, high impact, multi-year, low burdensome funding into our, all of our grant programs. And so I'm very excited about that. I'm very committed to that. And I really encourage other funders to keep working in that vein. If that was something that you did, we saw a lot of folks switch to that in COVID, and some folks are really embracing that and moving forward, and others, are finding, or needing to go back into, what it was like before. So I would just encourage you to ask why, and embrace the unrestricted.
Nice. Yeah. And we have seen that as a pretty common theme that we've seen here at Impacting Coffee too, with different foundations that have presented. So those unrestricted funds and the multi-year stuff are definitely things that I think are here to last, which is pretty awesome. So that's great.
Yeah. Super awesome.
Cool. And what are you looking forward to for the, since this year is kind of almost over, what are you looking forward to for 2022?
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to, we've done a lot of work around our commitment to diverse. Sorry, my light just went off in my office. Hold on, I think it'll come back on. I might have to stand up and do a crazy dance here. Just kidding. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But we've done a lot of work at the foundation around diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's been hard. It's been hard. It's been really raw. It's been wonderful. And I'm really excited to continue to see how that work moves across every aspect of our organization. And I really appreciate folks, who are committed to the work, who are working with the foundation, like Robert, to bring in a lot of perspective on our work. And I think that, it's been a hard year, not going to lie on that level. But I think that being in that space of hardship is where we find ourselves wrestling with the things we should be wrestling with and trying to make the changes, whether we're talking about learning or we're talking about culture or we're talking about shifting a practice or, implementing a new policy. I mean, I think all of that work happens at such a, it's all related to each other. And I think we're trying to move at all of those levels at the same time and really be accountable to the commitment we've made. So I'm looking forward to that journey and how it progresses with the good parts, the hard parts, and just being in community with folks.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Sure. I think that kind of goes back to one of the questions that we have on our list, and that's about how have you seen, so the pandemic has only exacerbated existing inequities in our community, and how have you seen this playing out in terms of its impact on our communities in particular? And then like the follow-up question to that is, how is your organization addressing this? So we see how you guys are addressing it by doing training and incorporating that, but what other type of inequities have you seen shine through during this pandemic time? And how do you think their impacts on our community are?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would offer anything that probably is the series of impact, as you all have been discussing this whole series through the whole pandemic about COVID has just been this incredible spotlight.
Sorry about that, y'all. Oh my gosh.
What happened, Robert?
We had a little scheduling conflict within internally within our own staffing, and so it's one of those things that cleared up. I had to just clear up quickly. Apologize for the inconvenience. I know we were making this, I know we were in the middle of this really great answer. I was like, oh man. So I'm just gonna do this and we'll just bring us back. Sorry about that, Marisa. I appreciate your patience, flexibility, and all. This is like the second time this has happened to us. So I need to clarify something within my own, within Pivotal's, apparently our own internal mechanism for scheduling. So yeah, oh my gosh. So it's
like the equivalent of the big hook, getting off the stage at the office or something. And they're like, okay, that's good.
Yeah, my apologies again, y'all, and we will make sure. Gosh, but I appreciate everyone's flexibility. I know it's rough out there, but we're just like you were saying earlier, Michael and Marisa. We live in a pandemic, so I really appreciate everyone's flexibility, and also just bringing our a little bit of humor into our Tuesday morning. My gosh.
I keep joking about this. I don't even know if anybody thinks it's funny, but I think, okay, when I don't know if anybody ever did this when you're scheduling an in-person meeting back in the day, and we would say okay, I'll meet you at Flying Star, and then you dreadedly show up at the Flying Star on Rio Grande versus the Flying Star in Nob Hill, and that was the point of major confusion in my life for many years. And now because one of the benefits of Zoom is like, wrong Zoom link, no problem. Just click again. You're right there. So
At least you don't have to drive to the other flying star or the other satellite.
You don't have to drive to the other flying star. Although we do not have the benefit of flying star pastries right now, unfortunately. Sharing those, but we can teleport.
We're like,
the other awkward thing about that is when you were meeting with somebody who you had never met before. And so then you'd get there and you'd be like, I think he's waiting for somebody. That's always awkward.
Yeah. Like,
at least, yeah. Now we got the Zoom.
Are you Michael? Yeah. Oh, no, you're not Michael. That's okay.
Just asking around. All right. Well, welcome back, y'all. So we were, Michael, what question were we on? I apologize. I think you'd asked about how
the inequities in the community.
Thank you. I will revert back to you.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. The question I asked was, well, it says the pandemic has only exacerbated existing inequities in our communities. How have you seen this playing out in terms of its impact on our communities in particular?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been interesting to like see what's happening at various stages of this crazy experience that situation that we're all living in. And right now, one of the things that we're really trying to support are organizations that are helping communities access, the housing and rental eviction funds or childhood tax credit programs, and so looking at where is the access and the navigation needed to make sure that those who need those resources can easily and access them. But I think I think that's what we're doing a lot right now in this particular stage and moment. And I think one of the conversations that, we've heard a lot from, I know I experienced this in my work at nonprofit, and then hearing from, so many folks is that goes back to the multi-year funding is like, if we really want systemic change to happen in our community, like we need a fund in that way, because we don't make systemic change in a one-year program. We make systemic change over 3, 4, 5, 6, years of work. And so I know that that's a critical way that we need to shift our thought process on how we fund organizations who are deep in systemic change work. And I think this "and" has become my favorite word of 2021, I'm not going to lie, and continue to fund like what's hurting right now. And I think it doesn't have to be this binary, like we can fund this or that. We have to look at where, across a spectrum of change, what we need to do to make that change possible. And yes, it is addressing need right now. And it's also looking at the systemic causes for that need and funding in that way. And I will say one other thing that I am really excited about is that nationally, through an organization we work with called CF Leads, they have an initiative that they're working across community foundations across the country called Going All In. And they're talking about, as what we're all experiencing, like the 3 core areas that community foundations need to be working in. And that is racial equity, advocacy and policy, and democracy. And so I'm really excited to explore what that means for our community foundation here in Albuquerque. We serve a 4-county region, and what to be involved in that conversation, because I would say that those are 3 areas that have been places that not all community foundations have worked in. Many are working in them, many are starting to work in them. And so I'm really excited to see more national energy around those 3 areas, and what does that mean for us here on a systemic change level.
Also talking about systemic change, a lot of that also has to do with partnerships. And we've seen partnerships become a huge component of the nonprofit community too. Have you also seen that? And what are your thoughts on that? Or do you have any success stories that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the things that I feel really strongly about from my background in nonprofit is that those partnerships have to be organically created and useful to the organizations themselves, and that true deep partnership work is best coming from organizations who are coming together who want to do that work together, who see the synergies, and as opposed to like a funder directed strategy. And so I really believe that's where true partnership and deep partnership serves folks best, specifically the organizations. When I was at the National Institute of Flamenco, we had really deep partnerships with the University of New Mexico, with Tierra Adentro Charter School, all around cultural education, flamenco, music and dance. And those things were so integrated and came from our own ecosystem. And that's why they worked. And so I really take that lesson to heart when it comes to partnership. We've also this year had an incredible partnership that started with the COVID response last year with the Emergency Action Fund with United Way and continues on with our DEI United Collaborative. And that's been a really cool, also a hard partnership. And I think their staff would probably agree, like coming together, being able to work deeply on a lot of different things from, our internal learning work to community conversations, to grant making, to, so on and so on, continuing to develop what this collaboration looks like. It's also reinforced our belief on how do we see ourselves as funders in supporting organization-led collaboratives, because we're in deep collaboration with this organization and we know how much time, hard work, energy, and just being reminded of that it takes to have really good partnerships is an active process.
Awesome, thank you. Cool, I'll toss it over to Robert. We'll ask you some more questions.
Yeah, I just want to flag how or lift up the difficulty you are having with some of those really tough DEI conversations. I know serving on the DEI committee for the Community Foundation myself, I know how tough it is. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that y'all are willing to go through that, because it's just, you can't wrap a bow on it and say you're doing DEI work or diversity, equity, inclusion work and say that it's all like cake and ice cream. It's not. And so it's tough, it's challenging, it's got all kinds of roadblocks. And we had to talk about tough subjects like white supremacy, which is not an easy subject to talk about, or sexism, or capitalism, or anything like those. Those are not easy things to talk about anyway. So I just want to lift up how much I appreciate that you are undertaking a lot of that journey. And so,
Thank you.
So, and then our hope is that I think my hope around that too is that how that works with other nonprofits seeking to do that work too, and wanting to undergo like that, this process, this journey, and walking along. And I think about it in terms of, where we are like right now in 2021, and thinking through like, this is where we are as a sector, as a community, and like we have to have these conversations. And if we don't, then it's business as usual. And business as usual was sucky. It sucked for everybody. I see Trish is not our head. Thanks, Trish. I see you. We can't go back to that. And I think that's been the message we've been trying to portray here at Impact and Coffee, is that we can't go back to normal. That normal was the worst. And, for a lot of folks in the call, like we have to create a new one that works for a lot of us, not just for some of us. And so, okay.
Could I offer something real quick on that?
Sure.
One of the things, in talking to different colleagues in, across foundations and nonprofits who are doing DEI work or leading that for their organizations, I recognize that there are many folks in this sector that their whole organizations, their entire existence have been fighting for equity, for justice. And, we're at the Community Foundation, like pretty new to the conversation and are really aware of where we are and how much work there is to do. But I also wanted to acknowledge that if there are folks out there that are like also new in their own work in organizations and feeling the fatigue around, okay, everybody was gung-ho last summer because everybody was jumping on the board, and now it's like, oh, this is really hard, we don't want to do this anymore. Like, please, let's stay in community together, because we need to stay in the work. We need to be committed to the whole journey, the process, the difficult conversations. And I have found a lot of energy in community going through that together. and whether, leaning on organizations and folks that have done this work for their whole lives, and the generosity that they have to share that knowledge and expertise, and also realizing that it takes a lot to get started, and that can feel really scary. And so I just would, offer any resource I can provide, just as a colleague or a peer, or even institutionally, would be happy to do that, because it is so critical that, especially as the energy wanes around equity work, or folks, there's backlash about it or whatever, like, we have to stay in the work. Okay, that's my soapbox. Sorry, Robert.
No, please. I loved it. I really appreciate that. Actually, I'm going to ask you, a deeper question around that too. Like, so how have you you mentioned fatigue. So how do you re-energize yourself through some of those challenges?
Yeah.
That is, some of it's monumental, and it can be deeply, deeply personal at times. And so what are ways in which you replenish yourself and get you through those tough times, if you don't mind?
I'm glad that you brought this up, because I think it's important to normalize talking about this sort of stuff, whether we're in equity work or just living through the pandemic and the incredible pace of time. Like, we have to normalize having conversations about our self-care, our mental health. And so thank you for bringing that up. For me, I find a lot of rejuvenation being outside. I ride horses. I feel like one day I'm going to write a blog later around like how horseback riding and equity work. I've learned so much between the two. Anyway, that's later. So being outside and one of the places that I have found so much energy is in community with folks who are deep in equity work, and just sharing the space and energy together. I'm also very deeply committed to working particularly with women of color, young women of color. I find so much nourishment in giving into those communities. And so those are some of the ways that I really recharge. And then if I, just a lot, like giving myself permission to, the other day I woke up at 8:30 and on a Saturday, and I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like, how could I have so much I need to do, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I can sleep till 8:30, like quit judging myself. So it's like those weird self conversations that you have about like the things your body needs or anything, and embracing them.
Yes, get that rest.
Get that rest. That's right. Rest is resistance. I love the nap ministry. That's like my favorite Instagram account right now.
Oh my gosh. I also just want to, Trish Lopez, I just want to lift up what you said in the chat. I would also love to add to what you said on persisting, if you don't mind unmuting.
Yeah, I thank you, Robert. Hi, Marisa. I don't know if you pronounce it Marisa. Marisa Teen Years has gotten funded from Albuquerque Community Foundation's donors in the past. So I'm familiar with your guys' work, and I just wanted to support you today, and Impacting Coffee in general. I love it. But what I was thinking about what you said about like, and when we tire, let's do what we can to keep that community going. I couldn't agree more, because I remember when starting Teen Years, which was 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago. First of all, nobody thought the idea was sexy in any way. Everybody was just like crickets in this room. It was like an entrepreneurial women's event, and there was about 100 and some people there. The city had sponsored it, and I shouldn't say nobody supported it. It was just very quiet, like everybody wanted to hear about the new apps and like the new things that were being manufactured, that were being pitched. And because I'm kind of anti-capitalist in general, and I've come more into that as I grow older, I was like, do people even realize that no one knows how to use these? Like, so many older people are left out of this. So many people can't afford, so many people don't have access. Like, there's just so many things. And anyway, I remember thinking, Teen Years ended up winning this competition, ended up going through a business accelerator. And during that business accelerator, I was in a cohort with with all these people who had very much a thought of, got this new app, going to sell out to Sony eventually. Like, it was a completely different mindset than a social entrepreneur, which is how I had developed. And my point is I don't even know how many CEOs went through that cohort, but only 2 of us are still alive. And I think there's so much to be said about like that amazing thing they're doing over there. Look at that amazing thing, or that amazing candidate, or this very popular, wow, if I'm going to support that. But I kind of think sometimes of like the turtle, like, what do you call it? The tortoise and the hare. where when you just persist, you can be going like, I'm just walking 5 miles an hour because I'm not going to kill myself to do, I'm a single mom and I'm like mom first, work second. So I'm very big on presenting that to the world so that other women and men know that they can prioritize that too. But as I persist, the more I see like, God, the persistence is what wins the day. The persistence and still existing. And this person who read about you in the Albuquerque Journal 4 years ago being like, oh, you still exist. You guys are still a thing. Thank you. I need help. Can you help me? That because word of mouth doesn't necessarily spread as fast as we think it does, for the good work that's going on out in the world. So to even continue to exist is to me the biggest accomplishment, So anyway, I second that. Community.
Thanks, Trish. Thanks for sharing that. It's super, super beautiful.
Absolutely. Thanks, Trish. I appreciate that. Yeah, it is a very capitalistic notion to think that we have to succeed immediately. So what it is even think about like putting us out there, like all the media that goes around it, like you have to be this big, huge thing. Like, no, like success also has to be like redefined in a different kind of environment, different kind of community. And so, and I don't think we're having deep enough conversations about what capitalism is in the nonprofit sector, especially, and how that affects our work, and then how that defines our personal lives, personally and then interpersonally, and then how we contribute to like the larger industrial complex that is the sector. Because I think, Marisa, you brought it up, like, how are you in relation with community? Oftentimes from a foundation standpoint is like, it's very, it can be bifurcating for communities and can be harmful. And so, so reckoning with some of that history as well, like, I started this call with like a stop the stadium kind of plug. And one of the reasons why is because I know exactly what that does for communities, what it does for gentrification in terms of displacement, and perpetuates a history of displacement, especially here in Albuquerque, having lived right here just next door to Martinez Town, and yeah, and I'm not going to go into that really long, deep thing, but I do know like how much like those, like where that goes, where the money's going, and it's hard. It's a hard conversation to have in community right now. And so, yeah, but I'm gonna circle this back because it's 9:52, and I really appreciate just this very rich conversation this morning. And if folks have other things they want to bring up too in the chat, like please. But Marisa, I'm gonna ask you this: just what is there anything you want to brag about from the foundation standpoint?
I want to brag on our team for a minute. We're a small team where we have 11 folks. We are hiring. So if, there's going to be 2 new positions coming out very soon, a governance associate and a marketing and events coordinator. And so I will share those, with folks, but please be on the lookout. But anyway, side note, back to the team. I mean, our organization has gone through a lot of change in the last, 2 years, operating to really at a frantic pace to try to get money out into community as best we can, knowing that our role is not direct service providers on the ground, and also want to be, give a lot of gratitude to those of you listening today and everyone out there who is doing direct service work, because it's critical. And being a level removed from that in the foundation space is like, wanting to get money out and respond to this pandemic with as much urgency as folks are working day to day on the ground. And this small team has gone through a lot. They're committed to our equity work. We've had so many hard conversations and wrestling with like conflict and learning how to be with one another at a really deep level, because equity work is deeply personal. And I'm so grateful for the team we have today and how supportive they are of me, of our work, of our commitment to equity. And so I would love to just brag about them.
That's awesome. And they are amazing. I know quite a few folks and gotten to know quite a few folks on staff lately, and it's been very, yeah, restorative, I think, in a lot of ways.
They're great. They're great.
It's 9:54. I just want to open up. If anyone has any other comments or questions, just invite folks in our audience today. If you have, you're welcome to unmute yourselves or lay your question or comment down in the chat.
I just wanted to say, like, I'm glad you said that, Robert, about the stadium, because I have opinions about it that I haven't shared. And I'm like, I have 3 or 4 friends that have asked me about that. I won't go into it now, but you're reminding me that I want to do a Facebook post on my thoughts of that and reminding people to vote.
Thanks, Trish. It means a lot coming from you, and your leadership, especially in our community, is so helpful. So I appreciate you. Anyone else want to share comments, questions, or anything like that?
Marisa, can I ask one really quick thing? Santa Fe Community Foundation was on Impact and Coffee once, and they talked about, here's how much, I want to say how much of their endowment or how much of their whatever went to programming. You may have said that in the beginning because I wasn't here for the first half hour. Can you share that?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question. So as far as, one thing is Santa Fe runs a little bit different than the Community Foundation in that they do have some direct service programs that they administrate from their organization. We do not have any direct service programs that we administrate at ACF. Lots of community foundations do, some don't. It's very common. So as far as the endowment, one thing I would share is that, we're distributing about, I would say, 4 to 8% of the endowment via grant programs, via donor advised fund distributions, different vehicles that, are giving circles. And then we allocate 5% of our endowment for impact investing. That is a different process that I know we mentioned a little bit here today for various socially minded enterprise and investments. And so that's 5% for that. And then, typically we're around 4 to 8% based on the different type of giving vehicle for endowment distributions. I don't know that that's exactly what you were asking me, but we don't run particular programs, so we wouldn't be able, that isn't a situation that we have at ACF.
Right. Yeah. You're right. Santa Fe does do that. And I think they were talking about their funding. And so I think you answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm happy to expand on that if you have any follow-up questions offline.
Marisa, can you share your email contact if possible in the chat, and we can go ahead and wrap up?
Yes.
Awesome. Michael, do you want to ask our last question?
Sure. So we always end Impact and Coffee with the same question, and it's what can this community do for you today?
Yeah. Okay, I was really excited about this question because I want to say that this community foundation belongs to the community. And so please get involved on some level. How can we facilitate that? We're doing a lot of stuff, still very virtual, hybrid, some in person. But please, this is your community foundation. And so we want to be accessible. We want to be invited. We want to be inclusive. If we're not, tell us. We want to understand so we can do better. Ways that you can get involved are lots of grant panels, committees, coming to, we'll reinstate lunch and learn conversations next year and do like our brown bag style lunch and learns. So I would just really invite you to get involved with your community foundation in a way that makes sense. If you don't see yourself in this community foundation, let's talk about it.
That is a great answer. Thank you for that. All right, so I guess that wraps up everything for today. Marisa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and thank you for helping us fill the entire hour. You had a lot of wonderful information, lots of knowledge, and I think it was very useful for our audience today. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, audience, for joining us today. We'll be back next week with, let me pull up our speakers real quick so I can let you know, November 9th, we're going to be hearing from Roadrunner Food Bank and also the Food Depot up in Santa Fe. So I encourage you all to join us next week at 9 a.m.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Go vote.
Right, go vote, everyone.
Go vote. Take care. See you soon, y'all.
See you soon.
See you, everyone.